When the Deputy Minister comes in, can we stand as an indication of honor that we are giving the Deputy Minister and our VC. So we are going to start within a very short space. We will just request you to take your seats, and when they come in, please stand up. Thank you, thank you. Sanibonani. Loshani. Molweni. Dumelang. Thobela. Dimacheroni. Ausheni. Goeiemorgen. Good morning. Haven't I tried? Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, colleagues, students, staff, members of the community, we want to welcome you to this occasion this morning, our today's public lecture. My name is Professor Mashudu Daba Namaseresere. I'm the Deputy Vice Chancellor who is responsible for teaching and learning. I have the privilege of serving you this morning as your program director for this public lecture. Let me welcome everyone who is participating even online, and also welcome you who are seated here. To our Vice Chancellor, Professor Tenjiwe Meiwa, we are really honored to have the Deputy Minister of Justice and Constitutional Development, Honourable Mr. Andries Nel, amongst us. I think we should applaud that. And also, together with his strategic team led by the acting head of DOJ and Constitutional Development, Ms. Caroline Shakwane, the CEO of PenSalb, just after we have signed, I'm sure 5 months after signing the MOU, the CEO is here, Dr. Kiaubaka Sishoka. We really appreciate you. I want to say to all other members of MENCO, the DVCs who are here, our traditional leader who is here, members of MENCO, deans and directors and students and all invited guests, we want to say welcome to our lecture today. Government representatives who are here, and we are saying also to students, this is very important. And I must say these are exciting times for UMP, the family of University of Mpumalanga. You know, our VC also talks about dialogue. Yesterday we had what we call asixoxisane, asixoxisane, and asixoxe. Oh yeah, I'm trying. So that means let's talk. Let's have a dialogue with each other. So it was a roundtable discussion, and the intention here was to launch the dialogue as she has indicated, asixoxisane, asixoxe. You know, our VC actually understands that dialogue is critical. If you want to build human connection, you need to talk to each other. We need that dialogue. Because when we do that, you also build trust amongst one another. You are able now to build a better working relationship. You are also able to resolve conflicts peacefully. And of course, we'll take the Justice Department out of the job if we are able to resolve our conflict without any fights. And we also have we foster our shared understanding amongst each other. And I think we really need to applaud the VC for that visionary leadership, because it's only when you interact, you dialogue with each other, that you'll eventually succeed. So this morning, we are honored that we are gathered here for a public lecture, which is going to be delivered by the Deputy Minister of Constitutional Development, as I've indicated, Honourable Mr. Andries Nel, under the theme, Indigenous Languages and the Justice System. So for us, UMP as a young university, it is a proud moment. And let me not waste much of your time and request our Vice Chancellor, our visionary, to come and give us a welcome address. Help me welcome her to the podium.
Visionary, I'm not quite sure about that, Prof. Mashudu. I just listen to people, and I was saying the other day to my colleagues, I've got no clue what's happening, what's going on. I get guided by the colleagues that report to me in terms of what should be the way forward. It's good to be here. If I were in church, I would actually be getting you to repeat that. It's been a long time since I've been to one. Churches tend to be very confined. Thank you so much, Prof. Mashudu, for for actually ushering me in. And we're excited. We're ready, DM. We've been oiled. Yesterday was the day of oiling ourselves for you. And I see my colleagues are here, the four of them, who actually got to blast us out. Let me stick to my script. I like doing this, and then I veer off and waste a lot of time. Honourable Deputy Minister of Justice and Constitutional Development, Mr. Andries Nel, your team that you've brought along, that we've met at the briefing, and the kind of work Caroline and colleagues that are doing, we acknowledge them. We acknowledge government departments that are online, some of whom are actually provincial MECs that promise to be online. I hope they're online. We acknowledge you. We also acknowledge, actually, we are online even outside of this country, in the eastern part of Africa, which is an hour ahead of us. We are online right now. I want to acknowledge members of council who had promised to be online. I wish there was a way to do the roll call, but I think my colleagues at the back are able to do that. Members of a community that have embraced us, in particular, Mtwanenkosi Sive, who is with us again today, abandoning all his busy schedules. Appreciate that, representing the traditional houses beyond your own, but the Khoisan as well. I'm going to have to put that on you. Members of the executive management of the university who are here, and also there's the promise to attend online, the DVCs, all my DVCs are here. Members of EMENCOA management colleagues that have come, and of course, we have a lot of imports, including CEO, who's driven all the way. She woke up at 2 a.m. to be here with us. Thank you, Madam CEO Pensov, for being here, and congratulations on your job. We want to appreciate everyone that I would not have mentioned, but more importantly, our staff who've abandoned their classes to come here. But some have brought the students with them here online and in person. The colleagues who are responding on the panel to respond to the minister, as I'm going to call you minister now, you're not deputy, you're minister now, honourable to me this morning. I'm humbled, privileged to be welcoming you to the University of Mpumalanga, to the land of the rising sun. I'm told this is where every African and every person who lives on this earth was born. At least this is from a scientist, archaeologist. Prof. Forsman, I'm citing now, Prof. Forsman told me that. Talking of a world-renowned scientists who actually, with the new discoveries that haven't been found, Deputy Minister, that we found here, he told me that. And Honourable Deputy Minister's presence is an affirmation that the truth doesn't end here. It doesn't end with what you experience, but the pursuit of justice goes beyond the truth that may be interpreted in different ways by different people. So it's not also, the DM is telling us, it's not only the responsibility of government, the state to do this, but it's also our responsibility. This morning we got to learn that within the DOJ there is a language division. Yesterday we started engaging on matters of language with the various colleagues from Drs. Makanya, Makubela, Sarah, as well as Zioki. We have been actually on this endeavor and call upon universities, us as representing the universities during this lecture as a community, but also through civil society and the heritage houses, through Mtwanenkosi Sive, as well as every citizen to commit to building a democratic society that's founded on dignity, on equality, and on freedom. And the minister has demonstrated that, the ministry, through the deputy minister, by bringing the books. You will have walked in and saw that you should be picking on those constitutional tools that you should be using to ensure that we really can collectively integrate with the Constitution that we have in hand, but through the theme of the lecture this morning, within which we want to interpret it as, can justice truly be said to exist if it cannot be understood in the language of the people? So, can justice truly be said to be existing if it doesn't exist in our languages? This is a question, DM, that's not only rhetorical, that's not only academic, but that is at the heart of what the DM is calling us as part of the ministry to not just be rhetorical, but to say, although the DM and his team was not here yesterday, but we're being called to this important step, a step of embracing the Asixoxeni Asixoxisani series that we launched yesterday, and to want to say that use this platform to advance languages, but more importantly, the underdeveloped indigenous languages, those that probably are my age and those that will have gone to school with the Swati, Ndebele speaking colleagues, they will know that they were forced to study Zulu because these two languages were not in their home languages. And this is just yesterday, although not that I was born yesterday, but in terms of when you look at the history, what it means is it's only been recently that we've started developing these languages. And we want to develop them, DM, through and using the DOJ to ensure that we extend this significance of the launch of these engagements in the dialogue to go beyond the walls of the universities, but to represent the declaration that indigenous knowledge, actually it should be, because it's plurality, indigenous knowledges, IK systems, the indigenous languages needs to have a rightful place within the justice system. Because for too long, these languages have primarily been sitting and staying in the dances, in the songs, in the dresses, in the ceremonies, in the traditions that we see through Gulobola, marriages, funerals, but not archived, technologically put in kinds of data formats that we're able to analyze, to go back to, and leave a legacy that we want to get South Africa to think, to dream, to negotiate meaning, to engage, to xoxa, sixoxisane, to solve problems and imagine things differently. And therefore, I just want to take a leaf a bit from what happened yesterday. For those that were not here yesterday, we got Professor Parko, I'll start from the end, actually I'm doing protocol here, who reminded us that yesterday, language cannot just be neutral, taking from his notes. He said it carries memory, it carries power, it carries values, and above all, it carries the possibility of transforming society. And our panelists, starting from Dr. Musara, you reminded us that language has economic value. And therefore, if you don't have a particular language that's recognized in the economic working world, you're less advantaged to access that working world. And therefore, you called upon the entrepreneurship pursuit to be inclusive of the economic growth using the tool and vehicle of language to get to that. Dr. Nzioki demonstrated how language shapes public discourse and could determine whose voices are heard, unheard, ignored, misinterpreted, and actually bastardized. this was very much relayed yesterday. And of course, in doing so, Dr. Makanya reminded us the meaningfulness of service delivery, that it begins with communicating, that the people that you talk to, talking of the absence of service delivery, or the presence thereof, or the ideal presence as we expect it to be, it can't happen without the language. And it's got to be in the language of the person who's feeling the pain, who's in this experiential lack of service delivery that's received or not received. And I want to end with the powerful Dr. Makubela's linkage to what's happening today. When she went into how language has become a barrier to justice, and how the survivors, I don't want to call them the survivors, Dr. Makubela, but rather the victors, not necessarily the use that we get to use as the victims, but indeed the survivors and those that are evicted through gender-based violence, that we often find that legal spaces take away their power, they disempower them because of the unfamiliar terminology yesterday, which is what you drew us to, and because of the legacies of a colonialism that has silenced and failed to empower them. This has brought me, as I move to the end of this welcome, but I needed to reflect on what happened yesterday for the benefit of those that were not here. And I must say that this is not actually what I had planned. I must thank Dr. Masuku, because she imposed this on me. She's a bully, and I just receive. She said I had to do this for the benefit of those who are not here. Ngugi wa Thiong'o, does he need any introduction? Not at all. He says, allow me to quote, our great African writer from East Africa, from South Africa as well. Language carries culture, and culture carries the entire body of values by which we come to perceive ourselves and our place in the world. So, a close quote. And if therefore language carries culture, carries identity, carries values, so must justice. Justice should be carrying language, carrying culture, carrying identity, carrying compassion, carrying empathy, carrying, to be caring, to be conversational. And I want to take a leaf from, I don't know whether you've been following Botswana. Botswana is amazing, eh? We have a lot to learn from Botswana. I want to be a Botswanian right now. DM, I'm going to ditch South Africa and go to Botswana. I mean, the president here really speaks to me so much. I hope you're following this politics that's happening with the African leaders, like the Court of War one, in terms of how they call these things into question. But let me sit with Botswana, our neighbor, where with the Botswanan president that's fairly new in the office, he's demonstrated that multilingual justice system strengthens rather than weakens democracy, and that's practiced in Botswana. Aren't we being embarrassed by a nation that's about 2 million, a little bit above that? That's less than even the population of Mpumalanga. But they've challenged the justice system, DM, to want to go multilingual in their justice system. And I must go to Kigali. Rwanda's Gakaka has shown that restorative justice is important. They've put in reconciliation, memory, etc. In their justice system. And so are others. For instance, Tanzania and Kenya, they also, through Kiswahili is in the justice system of those two countries. It's my hope, DVC TNL, that we introduce Kiswahili. Let me just possibly stop a bit and talk about a story that embarrassed me a lot when I first visited China about 15 years ago. I had colleagues from Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, Zimbabwe as well, and I think we had about 6 countries from the southern part of Africa. They could all communicate, and I was just thinking, and here I was just like watching the tennis ball, and they said, "Where do you come from?" Because I couldn't connect. Everybody was speaking this. That's the lingua franca of Africa, and here we are, we're still sleeping on it. I must actually congratulate my alma mater, UKZN, who've introduced and made it compulsory for some degrees that you must have Kiswahili, because unless you have that, and also unless you have Mandarin in certain economic degrees, qualifications, you're not going to be graduating, at least just a module of half a semester. So this languages issue gets to equal the level ground. Therefore, as universities, as I close, I want to say, we shouldn't just preserve knowledge. We shouldn't just disseminate knowledge. We shouldn't just have knowledge in research reports and also in the number of publications that you have and books that you have published. But we should interrogate assumptions that we have and imagine alternatives through our languages that are possible and prepare our students and our leaders to transform society by using knowledge. This requires courage, Prof. Strobel. It requires, actually we have amendment here, it requires us, as we open that past CFO, that we need to imagine differently where we are relative to the future. It requires that we develop African languages. It requires that we say justice should be bound to our languages, not just to have an inclusive democracy, but to ensure that we hear these languages in the Constitution. Thank you, DM, that the Constitution is translated into various languages, although the DM LL said he's not happy with some of the translations. I was very surprised and actually embarrassed that I can't say anything about my language, whether on a stage I can say it's properly translated in the Constitution. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, students, staff, DM, let us ensure that precisely we get every participating citizen not to participate by only existence in this country, existence in this continent, but by being involved, included through the tool within the JOD systems. We therefore look forward to your insightful leadership. Minister gained a lot this morning when we were getting a briefing that all our guests, students, get to join us and listen to the lecture and get ignited from yesterday into today. We get inspired to ensure that this institution doesn't only honor the 10 values that we have, but we get to live them fully, and that future generations will, when they look back and say, it was during this season that we existed, that Mpumalanga didn't just only chose to merely observe history, observe the Constitution, celebrate the Department of Justice and Constitution, but we're shaping it through inclusion, igniting of the dignification of the indigenous knowledges and the indigenous languages. You're welcome to the University of Mpumalanga. Sanbonani.
Another round of applause. Just before we proceed, let me introduce my colleague standing here. Do you know that South Africa have 12 languages? So this is our 12th, and she is going to do what she knows best. IES. We're leading by example. When we're saying, let's speak our language, let's use our languages, we are indeed leading by example. Madam Vice-Chancellor, thank you. Thank you for your powerful welcome address that would make us run to the streets and start doing the work differently, because I think that was what she was doing psychologically to us all. I heard you saying introduce Swahili, Kiswahili, and make it compulsory. And I was sitting there asking myself, where do I start? But fortunately, you also said, be courageous and do that. And I'm going to come back to you and say, this time around, I need your help. And I hope you'll be able to assist us as we develop our African languages. And that's what we are going to do as a university. So we are grateful for the presentation, for the welcoming address that you make. And we heard you that indeed we need to have our citizens involved. In the DOJ, we need to speak our language. You know, you reminded me of a situation at my home where a lady, an elderly person was raped, long time ago. And sometimes when a person is angry in my language, you speak in a sarcastic way. You say the opposite. So they were asking her those deep questions, and she was angry. Became so furious that she says, no, nothing happened. No, nothing happened. And just like that, she was almost losing the case. But fortunately, there were people in that who understood the context under which she was saying what she was saying. And fortunately, the case was postponed. And then later, she was educated. Or you need to say exactly what happened. And somebody supported her. And if it wasn't for that person who was there, that lady would have lost the case and the person would have gone out free of charge. And that thing, I can't forget it. Because for me, it says, do you really know our languages? Do we understand? You know, because when a person says, no, nothing happened, you should know that the person is very angry. So I think that is also a challenge to our justice system. Allow me to also officially introduce our traditional leader. I think it is important that I introduce him. The fifth descendant of King Mswati II from Kalom Shio Royal Kroll. I hope I've done better. Is Umfane Wankosi Sivesitle Violetu Dlamini. Sanbonani. With that, I'm going to welcome a request, Professor Aldo Strubel, our DVC, who is responsible for research, innovation, and internationalization, to come and introduce our guest speaker. Help me welcome him to the stage. Thank you.
Esteemed guests, dear colleagues, a very warm good morning to everyone. It's really my pleasure to have been requested to introduce the esteemed Member of Parliament, Deputy Minister of Justice and Constitutional Development, Andries Nel. His journey reflects the story of a generation who chose to confront injustice rather than simply witness it. Born in the United States while his father served as a diplomat and spending part of his youth in Brazil, he grew up with an international perspective that exposed him to different political systems and cultures. Yet it was on returning to South Africa during the final years of apartheid that his life's purpose became clear. As a law student at the University of Pretoria, Nel became involved in the struggle for democracy through student organizations and anti-conscription activism. Rather than pursuing a conventional legal career, he chose to work for lawyers for human rights, dedicating himself to campaigns against the death penalty and to improving the country's justice system. These early choices reveal a commitment not only to legal principles, but to the belief that the law should protect human dignity and serve society's most vulnerable. South Africa's democratic transition opened a new chapter in his life. Elected to Parliament in 1994, Nel became part of the generation entrusted with building democratic institutions from the ground up. His contribution to the Constitutional Assembly placed him at the center of one of the country's defining achievements, the creation of a constitution founded on equality, accountability, and human rights. Throughout the years that followed, he earned a reputation as a diligent parliamentarian, often working behind the scenes in leadership and procedural roles that demanded patience, integrity, and consensus building rather than public acclaim. His appointments as Deputy Minister of Justice and Constitutional Development and later Deputy Minister of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs reflected the confidence successive administrations placed in his experience and institutional knowledge. Returning to the Justice portfolio in 2024, after a period of serving the ANC organization, underscores both his resilience and his enduring commitment to strengthening South Africa's constitutional democracy. He's a scholar and intellectual in his own right by virtue of his appointments at the Johannesburg Institute of Advanced Study at the University of Johannesburg as Research Fellow and as a director at the Mabungubwe Institute of Strategic Reflection. Deputy Minister, if I may, looking back over your career, one sees more than a sequence of political appointments. It is the story of someone whose professional life has consistently been guided by the values of justice, constitutionalism, and public service. From campaigning for human rights as a young lawyer to helping shape democratic institutions and supporting the administration of justice, your contribution has been defined less by personal prominence, but by a steadfast belief in the institutions that safeguard South Africa's democracy. Dear colleagues, it's really my pleasure to present to you Member of Parliament and Deputy Minister of Justice and Constitutional Development, Mr. Andries Nel.
Program Director Vo Mashudu Ndialivua Ngamanda Ndo Takara Ngamanda u Vehapa Ndi Umbera Farero Ndi Amba Chivenda Fedzi Ati Ambi Zwabudi Budi. Vice Chancellor, and thank you very, very much to Professor Struble for a very, very kind introduction. The Vice Chancellor and Principal of the University of Mpumalanga, Professor Tenjiwe Meiwa, Professor Struble, Professor Moses Mbewe, the Deputy Vice Chancellor for Postgraduate Studies, Engagement and Planning, members of the University Council and the Executive Management present, our distinguished respondents, Dr. Makanya, Dr. Musara, Dr. Nzioki, and Dr. Makubela. Of course, Dr. Masuku. Also a very special welcome to the CEO of Pansalb, Dr. Kiobaka Sishoka, members of the judiciary and the legal profession, Kosivuyo Letu, Dlamini, and other traditional leaders here present, students of the University of Mpumalanga, colleagues, comrades, and friends. Dumelang, Lochani, Sanbonani, Molweni, Ndimacheroni, Avusheni, Goeiemorgen, good morning, bon dia, bonjour, ça va bien? Soyez le bienvenu. And then to assist the program director, I can also say habari za asubuhi. I extend also a very warm welcome to South African Sign Language users and to all who join us through interpreters. My fluency in sign language is nothing to write home about, although I did find it very, very interesting, especially in this context. And I can be helped. My understanding is that good morning in South African Sign Language is, but maybe more appropriate for where we are, there's another variant, which goes like this, symbolizing the morning as the rising sun. So I also acknowledge the scholars, the language practitioners, translators, interpreters, and lexicographers who've dedicated themselves to the development of South African languages. Their work reminds us that language carries more than words. It carries memory, identity, knowledge, social experience, and, importantly, conceptions of justice. It's a particular honor to deliver this lecture at the University of Mpumalanga. This university is one of two public universities established by the democratic state after 1994. It therefore embodies an important principle. Institutions are not merely inherited, they can be created. The democratic state can establish new centers of knowledge, locate them differently, open them to people previously excluded, and ask them to undertake intellectual work that older institutions neglected. There could hardly be a more fitting place for this discussion. Mpumalanga is the place of the rising sun, a sun that signifies hope and renewal, but also illuminates oppression and exploitation, and a proud history of resistance, associated with heroes such as Gertsi Bande, Ruth First, Nokuthula Simelane, Pixlika Isaac Aseme, Henry Nxumalo, Saul Mkhize, Nomoya Masilela, and Mahatma Gandhi. It's especially poignant that this lecture takes place shortly after the 50th anniversary of the 1976 student uprising, that reminds us that language is never only a means of communication, but a dynamic expression of relations of social, economic, and political power. It's equally significant that we meet shortly before the 70th anniversary of the Women's March of August 1956. These struggles made possible both the creation of institutions such as this university, as well as the adoption of our democratic constitution. We meet during the year in which South Africa celebrates the 30th anniversary of the adoption of our constitution in 1996. We celebrate that anniversary under the theme, One Constitution, One Nation. Reflect, renew, recommit. The theme asks us to look backwards and forwards at the same time, to reflect on the history from which the Constitution emerged, to renew the institutions through which its promises must be realized, and to recommit ourselves to the unfinished work of constitutional transformation. Before proceeding, I respectfully invite everyone to rise, whether in body or in spirit, and to recite the preamble to the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. We, the people of South Africa, recognize the injustices of our past. Honor those who suffered for justice and freedom in our land. Respect those who have worked to build and develop our country. And believe that South Africa belongs to all who live in it. United in our diversity. We therefore, through our freely elected representatives, adopt this Constitution as the supreme law of the Republic. So as to heal the divisions of the past and establish a society based on democratic values, social justice, and fundamental human rights. Lay the foundations for a democratic and open society in which government is based on the will of the people and every citizen is equally protected by law. Improve the quality of life of all citizens and free the potential of each person. And build a united and democratic South Africa, able to take its rightful place as a sovereign state in the family of nations. May God protect our people. Nkosi Sikelela Afrika. Morena Buluka Sichaba sa Jesu. God seën Suid-Afrika. God bless South Africa. Mudzimu fatuchedza Afrika. Hosi katikisa Afrika. Thank you very much. The preamble matters to today's subject because it speaks in the first person, we the people. Yet a people does not exist without language. We remember injustice through language. We debate social justice through language. We give reasons for the exercise of public power through language. We formulate rights through language and encounter the law through language. If the law speaks in words that most citizens cannot use confidently, the constitutional promise of equal protection is weakened at the very point where it must become real. And it's therefore significant that language appears not at the margins of the Constitution, but in Chapter 1, the founding provisions. And just for those of you who know your Constitution, everything in the Constitution can be amended through a 2/3 majority, except the founding provisions, which require 75% majority to amend. And the location of language in the founding provisions, I think, symbolizes its fundamental importance. Section 6 recognizes now 12 official languages, including South African Sign Language. But more importantly, Section 6.2 does not merely celebrate diversity. It diagnoses a historic injustice. It recognizes, quote, the historically diminished use and status of indigenous languages of our people, close quote, and it imposes a positive duty on the state to, quote, take practical and positive measures, close quote, to elevate their status and advance their use. The constitutional wording is exacting. It identifies history, not linguistic inadequacy, as the source of inequality. It requires action, not ceremonial recognition. It requires measures that are practical and positive, not promises that remain permanently aspirational. Section 6 must also be read with equality, dignity, freedom of expression, cultural participation, education, access to courts, and the right of an accused person to be tried in a language that the accused understands, or when that is not practicable, to have the proceedings interpreted. Before proceeding further, I must make declarations of 3 I's. Declarations of irony, of intimidation, and of intellectual interest. Firstly, I must declare the obvious irony of delivering a lecture on Indigenous languages in English. English is not my first language, so the irony is not personal, it's institutional. English remains the principal language of legislation, judgments, legal publishing, university teaching, professional exchange and advancement. I use it today as a shared medium, but that convenience itself reflects the historical process this lecture addresses. Secondly, I must make a declaration of intimidation. I'm delivering a public lecture on language and the justice system, following in the giant footsteps of Chief Justice Mandisa Maya, who recently delivered the Linguistic Human Rights public lecture, Proceedings, including Judgments in Your Own Language. She argued that language rights are not linguistic luxuries, but conditions for dignity, equality, and meaningful access to justice. Proceedings must be understood, interpretation must be competent, and judgments should increasingly be available in people's preferred languages. Her intervention is of exceptional importance because it places linguistic transformation within the constitutional responsibilities of the judiciary itself, turning multilingual justice from an academic aspiration to an institutional imperative. As President of the Supreme Court of Appeal, she also made history by writing the court's judgment in AfriForum versus UNISA in isiXhosa and English. The judgment concerned the language policy of the University of South Africa regarding Afrikaans. Thirdly, I must make a declaration of intellectual interest. Former Chief Justice Pius Langa observed that judges and lawyers enter decisions with intellectual and social baggage. Apartheid legal culture often concealed those influences behind claims of technical neutrality. Constitutional culture requires greater candor because respect for legal decisions should arise from the quality of the reasons offered rather than the status of the person who offers them. In that spirit, I disclose my own baggage. It's the baggage of a revolutionary constitutional democrat, a member of a national liberation movement, and of a party of the working class and the poor, and a person whose intellectual outlook has been shaped by a materialist conception of history. I do not offer that declaration as a substitute for argument. I offer it so that the premises of my argument can be examined rather than concealed. I summarize this declaration in 10 theses. Thesis 1, material reality exists independently of our consciousness of it. Thesis 2, Human beings transform nature through labor, and in doing so, transform themselves. Thesis 3. Social being shapes consciousness. Ideas, values, and legal systems are profoundly influenced by material conditions and forms of social organization that arise from them. These, in turn, have a profound influence on the maintenance or transformation of those same material conditions and social organization. Thesis 4. Everything exists in process. Societies, institutions, languages, and laws are never entirely static. We must therefore, in the words of the late Rick Turner, who was assassinated by the apartheid regime, always look at, quote unquote, the present as history. Thesis 5. Development occurs through contradiction, because every social order contains tensions that generate pressure for change. Thesis 6. Quantitative changes can accumulate until, sometimes abruptly, they produce qualitative transformation. Thesis 7. Opposing tendencies are mutually constitutive. They represent a unity and struggle of opposites that shape one another. Accordingly, we must understand reality in its interconnected totality. Thesis 8. History is structured but open-ended. It is neither predetermined nor random. Material conditions and social contradictions generate discernible tendencies and possibilities, but their outcomes depend on human agency and struggle. People make history, but they do so under conditions inherited from the past. Thesis 9. Theory and practice form a unity, because ideas are tested and refined through social action. Thesis 10. Social institutions are historically produced and therefore historically transformable. These theses form the central proposition of this lecture. Legal languages are historically produced social institutions. They emerge through political power, economic development, cultural practice, and institutional labor as courts, legislatures, universities, professional bodies, publishers, and communities create and transform the languages through which the law is understood. This premise matters because language debates are distinctly vulnerable to abstraction. In what Anton Jäger calls the age of hyperpolitics, political feeling intensifies while durable organization weakens. Controversies erupt rapidly, identities are asserted, and moral positions hardened, but the institutions needed to sustain collective action for transformation remain thin. Language can easily become hyperpolitical in this sense. We proclaim that indigenous languages must be elevated, yet fail to build the terminology units, the translation systems, the publishing programs, the professional incentives, the digital corpora, teaching materials, and budgets required to do so. Hyperpolitics can produce symbolic heat without institutional accumulation. A progressive program must instead connect conviction to organization, recognition to resources, and constitutional aspiration to cumulative work. A language of jurisprudence is not a viral event, but an intergenerational project within a wider project of economic, social, and cultural transformation. To clarify that project, I propose a distinction among three legal functions that a language may perform. First, A language may be a language used in legal proceedings. A witness testifies in it, an accused person follows evidence in it, or a litigant consults through it. Competent interpretation is indispensable at this level. Without it, participation may become illusory, and a fair trial may be compromised. A corollary to this is that language is an enabler of rights. Secondly, a language may become a legal language. It develops a sufficiently stable technical vocabulary to express legal rules, institutions, and procedures. Dictionaries translated, statutes, standard forms, terminology lists, and professional training contribute to this development. Thirdly, a language may become a language of jurisprudence. At this level, it does not merely carry legal ideas first formulated elsewhere. It participates in generating legal concepts, forms of reasoning, and theories of justice from with its own intellectual resources. Judgments are conceived and written in it, doctrine is debated in it, students learn to reason legally through it, and communities bring concepts embedded in it into the conversation with the Constitution. The three functions overlap, but they're not identical. Interpretation can make a proceeding accessible without changing the language in which authoritative legal reasoning is produced. A translated dictionary can expand vocabulary without creating a community of scholars who develop doctrine in that language. A genuinely multilingual constitutional order therefore requires more than interpreted access. It requires participation in the production of jurisprudence itself. Translation remains essential, but it is not neutral. Translation is never the mechanical replacement of one word with another. It's an encounter between conceptual worlds. Ubuntu, Botu, joins relational personhood to reciprocal obligation. Ukuhlawulela brings together compensation, atonement, and restoration. Ukubuyisana concerns the rebuilding of relations after conflict. Lehotla, Inkundla, Indaba denote processes, institutions of deliberation, consensus, and authoritative decision. Hlonipa expresses respect through conduct, language, kinship, and social position. Ilima or Litsima evokes reciprocal communal labor. None is fully captured by a single English equivalent. Nor should we assume that English legal concepts can simply be translated into another language without being tested against its grammar, history, and social experience. Translation, at its best, changes both sides of the encounter. It reveals assumptions that appear natural, and it creates new possibilities of legal thought. To understand the present, we must reject one of the oldest assumptions of colonial jurisprudence, the claim that Africa possessed customs but not law. Long before European settlement at the Cape, the peoples of Southern Africa had developed normative systems governing political authority, land, succession, marriage, trade, diplomacy, compensation, dispute resolution, and public accountability. However, there was never a single undifferentiated African customary law. Each tradition arose historically, changed over time, and reflected particular social relations. None of these legal systems, most of these legal systems were predominantly oral. To call them merely unwritten, however, is accurate but insufficient. Writing was not absent because people lacked intellectual sophistication. legal authority was organized differently. European traditions increasingly located authority in canonical texts, Roman sources, religious law, royal ordinances, statutes, and deeds and judicial reports. African traditions located authority in living institutions and collective practice, families, councils, elders, traditional leaders, communities, memory and deliberation. Law therefore remained embedded within social life rather than separated from it as an autonomous textual system. Legal language organized ordinary life to understand obligations, authority, injury, restitution, and justice. In a real sense, communities spoke their own law. However, this history should not be romanticized. Pre-colonial societies contained hierarchy, patriarchy, conflict, coercion, and unequal power. Living customary law is neither inherently just nor constitutionally immune. In Alex Kor, Bear, Shilowana, Gumede, Maelane, the Constitutional Court recognized customary law as an independent source of norms and a living, evolving system whose development must be respected, but whose rules, like all rules, remain subject to dignity, equality, freedom, and the Bill of Rights. The Court's jurisprudence is important precisely because it rejects two opposite errors. Firstly, the colonial reduction of customary law to a primitive relic, and secondly, the romantic insulation of every inherited practice from constitutional scrutiny. Indigenous languages thus do not approach the Constitution as empty containers awaiting legal content. They carry accumulated legal memory. They encode understandings of reconciliation, kinship, authority, consensus, land, obligation, and restorative justice. The constitutional task is therefore not to freeze those concepts in an imagined past, but to bring their intellectual resources into dynamic conversation with democratic constitutionalism. European settlement transformed the relationship between language and legal authority. The Dutch East India Company did not merely establish a trading station. It introduced a colonial state built through written administration, commercial contracts, property registration, taxation, official correspondence, documentary archives, and a permanent bureaucracy. Colonial conquest was therefore not only military and territorial, it was institutional and linguistic as well. Dutch became the language of colonial authority, not because it possessed superior expressive qualities, but because those who controlled the state controlled the language through which the state operated. For the first time in Southern Africa, state law became systemically detached from ordinary linguistic life through the ordinary linguistic life of most people subjected to it. Law increasingly spoke one language while society spoke others. Indigenous legal systems did not disappear. Communities continued to resolve disputes and to regulate social relationships. Traditional institutions continued to exercise authority, but the institutional balance changed. One legal order increasingly possessed coercive power of the colonial state. Others operated within spaces tolerated, restricted, or redefined by it. Mahmoud Mamdani's account of the bifurcated colonial state helps illuminate this process. Colonial government constructed a division between citizens governed through civil institutions and subjects governed through administratively fashioned custom. That bifurcation was legal and political, but also linguistic. Language is associated with the central state, commerce, and professional education accumulated official authority, while indigenous languages were confined increasingly to local administration, community life, and the domain labeled customary. This was not genuine legal pluralism among equals. It was hierarchical pluralism. The state could recognize customary institutions while subordinating them, preserve African languages while restricting their functions, and invoke tradition while shaping it for administrative control. British occupation did not simply replace Dutch law with English law. Roman Dutch law survived and continues to shape South African private law. Older forms persisted with new institutions. Yet the Mineral Revolution transformed the political economy within which legal language developed. The discovery of diamonds and gold accelerated urbanization, expanded railways, intensified taxation, enlarged state bureaucracies, and created new demands for labor regulation, finance, insurance, banking, and commercial litigation. Industrial capitalism produced not only a social division of labor, but what may be called a division of linguistic labor. English increasingly occupied commerce, finance, the higher courts, and advanced professional education. Dutch, and later Afrikaans, retained influence in agriculture, education, parts of public administration, and substantial parts of the legal profession. Indigenous African languages remained the principal languages through which millions organized family life, customary relationships, community institutions, local exchange, and everyday social existence. This differentiation was not natural or merely cultural. It reflected institutional investment and the organization of production. Different languages acquired different social functions because institutions equipped them unequally. English thereby accumulated linguistic capital, not merely vocabulary, but the intellectual labor embodied in dictionaries, textbooks, journals, legislative conventions, reported judgments, archives, teaching practices, and professional networks. Each generation inherited and enlarged what previous generations had produced. And English became to appear naturally suited to jurisprudence because the institutions of jurisprudence continuously produced it as such. The history of Afrikaans provides decisive evidence that legal languages are made rather than born. Afrikaans was once dismissed as an unsophisticated dialect. Through deliberate institutional work, however, it became a highly developed language of law and scholarship. Universities established Afrikaans faculties, scholars wrote textbooks, judges delivered judgments, legislatures drafted statutes, publishers invested in legal literature, terminology committees standardized vocabulary, and students were trained to think legally through Afrikaans. So Afrikaans did not mature biologically. It was developed socially. Its history, therefore, refutes the suggestion that indigenous African languages lack some inherent capacity for advanced legal reasoning. The relevant question is not whether isiNdebele, Siswati, Xitsonga, Sepedi, isiZulu, isiXhosa, Sesotho, Setswana, and Tshivenda are capable of jurisprudence. The question is whether South African institutions will invest the sustained intellectual labor required to develop that capacity within a modern legal system. The National Liberation Movement described South Africa's social formation as colonialism of a special type. Colonizer and colonized occupied the same territory, while remaining divided by deeply unequal social, economic, and political relations defined by race, class, and gender. Whatever disputes attend to the concept, it directs attention to the institutional reproduction of domination. That production included a hierarchy of production of legal language, English and Afrikaans occupied the institutions that generated authoritative state law, while indigenous languages were largely excluded from the commanding sites of jurisprudential production. We might therefore speak of the means of legal production: courts, legislatures, universities, law schools, law reform bodies, professional associations, publishers, libraries, archives, digital databases, and increasingly, artificial intelligence systems. These institutions do more than apply law. They produce vocabulary, identify authoritative sources, structure professional memory, and determine which legal arguments can circulate. Control over these means of legal production profoundly shapes which languages accumulate jurisprudential authority. Neville Alexander provides the language theory required to understand some of this history. For Alexander, language is neither a cultural ornament nor only an individual right. It was a question of political economy, social equality, democratic participation, and nation formation. Languages acquire power because institutions give them power. Alexander rejected the idea that linguistic choice is neutral. A society may formally permit people to use their languages while organizing every consequential institution through one dominant language. Under those conditions, formal freedom coexists with substantive inequality. Those who command the dominant language can enter higher education, professional work, public administration, and law with greater confidence. Others must bear the cognitive, financial, and emotional costs of operating through an additional language and through professional intermediaries. The dominance of English, therefore, cannot be explained by its inherent clarity. It reflects the accumulated history of the colonial state, commerce, schooling, universities, publishing, and administration. Conversely, the marginal position of African languages does not demonstrate incapacity. It demonstrates exclusion from the domains in which intellectual capacities are developed and publicly recognized. Alexander opposed both assimilation into English and the apartheid form of multilingualism. Assimilation preserves colonial privilege behind the appearance of a common language. Apartheid multilingualism promoted African languages within territorially bound ethnic projects designed to divide the oppressed. Democratic multilingualism must pursue a different objective: unity without uniformity and diversity without separation. His distinction between linguistic status and function is particularly important. Constitutional recognition gives a language formal status, but a language acquires social authority only when it performs consequential functions in education, government, science, commerce, and professional life. Recognition without functional expansion, can become a form of symbolic compensation for continuing material inequality. Applied to justice, Alexander's argument is clear. Indigenous languages will not become languages of jurisprudence merely because witnesses may use them through interpreters. They must progressively become languages in which pleadings are prepared, statutes are explained, and eventually drafted. Law is taught, judgments are reasoned, legal commentary is published, and constitutional concepts are debated. This development will not occur through market forces alone. The existing linguistic market rewards English precisely because past institutions have invested in it. Alexander also warned against identifying every language with a fixed and bounded ethnicity. Languages overlap, borrow, and change. Citizens possess multiple identities and often speak several languages. The constitutional project must not reproduce Bantustan boundaries in linguistic forms. Multilingual justice should expand individual and collective agency not assign to each person permanently a supposed authentic ethnic language. This brings us back to Pius Langa. Although Karel Clare introduced the term transformative constitutionalism into South African legal scholarship, Langa gave it a distinctive South African jurisprudential content. He treated the Constitution as the continuation of the historic bridge described in the epilogue of the interim Constitution, a bridge from a deeply divided past towards a democratic future. The bridge is not a neutral structure across which society walks unchanged. The Constitution is an instrument for reconstructing social relationships and public institutions. Langa accordingly described transformative constitutionalism in terms broad enough to encompass a social and economic revolution. Its purpose is not exhausted by a change of government or the formal abolition of discriminatory laws. It seeks to transform political institutions, legal culture, material inequality, and the relationship between public power and the people. Central to that project is substantive equality. The identical treatment can produce injustice where people enter institutions from profoundly unequal historical positions. Constitutional analysis must therefore ask what practical conditions are necessary for people to enjoy dignity, freedom, and equal citizenship. In the context of language, it is not enough that everyone is formally free to speak any official language if only one language provides direct access to legal education, precedent, professional advancement, and authoritative reasoning. Langa also emphasized the transformation of a legal culture. Apartheid legality relied heavily on a culture of authority. Parliament had spoken, an official was empowered, a rule existed. Constitutional supremacy demands a culture of justification. Every exercise of public power must be supported by reasons consistent with constitutional values. Yet reasons exist through language. If legal culture must be transformed, then the linguistic medium through which reasons are formulated, tested, and understood must also be transformed. This is the extension of Langa's theory that I wish to propose. Transformative constitutionalism requires linguistic transformation because legal culture is produced and reproduced through language. The claim does not diminish the value of English legal thought. It contests monopoly, not communication. A multilingual jurisprudence would permit legal concepts to move in several directions. It would allow constitutionalism to speak more directly to people's lived experience and indigenous concepts to reshape constitutional reasoning. Transformation in Langa's account is a permanent ideal rather than a destination at which society finally arrives. That insight protects us from two errors. The first, triumphalism, the belief that formal recognition in 1996 completed linguistic transformation. The second is despair, the belief that 3 decades of slow progress proves that transformation is impossible. If institutions are historically made, then they can be remade, although doing so requires organization, resources, experimentation, and time. At this point, it's necessary to address a contemporary argument. Some propose that South Africa should abandon constitutional supremacy for parliamentary sovereignty and simultaneously replace Roman Dutch law with an indigenous legal order. The grievance to which this proposal appeals is real. Our law remains marked by colonial inheritance, economic exclusion, and distance from the lived experience of many citizens. However, the proposed remedy, whilst radical in form, is reactionary in substance. Parliamentary sovereignty was the constitutional instrument through which apartheid was enacted. It permitted a racially exclusive parliament to classify people, dispossess communities, restrict movement, suppress political organization, and insulate injustice behind formal legality. The 1996 Constitution does not remove power from the people and hand it to judges. It records a democratic decision by the people to bind every institution, including Parliament, to dignity, equality, freedom, accountability, and the rule of law, and a transformative program underpinned by justiciable socio-economic rights. Nor should decolonization be reduced to erasing Roman Dutch law by proclamation. South African law is already a mixed, historically layered and constitutionally transformed legal system. Roman Dutch law, English law, legislation, customary law, and constitutional jurisprudence interact within it. The question is not which single legal tradition must annihilate all others, but how every inherited rule should be tested, developed, or discarded in light of the Constitution and the lived realities of the people, united in their diversity. Section 211 of the Constitution requires courts to apply customary law when it is applicable, subject to the Constitution and legislation. The Constitutional Court has repeatedly recognized customary law as an integral component of the legal system, not a tolerated exception to quote-unquote real law. Its doctrine of living customary law seeks to understand norms as they develop in community practice rather than freezing them in colonial codes and official textbooks. Abolishing constitutional democracy would not liberate customary law. It would remove the normative framework through which women, children, and marginalized members of communities can contest unequal exercises of both public and traditional authority. A progressive approach must reject both colonial contempt for customary law and any attempt to place any power beyond constitutional justification. This year marks the 30th anniversary of the adoption of South Africa's Constitution, a milestone that reminds us of the profound gains made in language development, language protection, and the promotion since the advent of democracy. We've laid the foundation for a democracy that values and protects linguistic diversity through the creation of institutions such as the Pan-South African Language Board, the Commission for the Promotion and Protection of the Rights of Cultural, Religious, and Linguistic Communities, as well as enacting legislation such as the Use of Official Languages Act and the South African Language Practitioners Council Act. Justice Vision 2000, published under the late Minister Dula Omar during the first years of democracy, offers an important institutional counterpart to former Chief Justice Langa's theory. It was far more than a departmental plan. It sought to transform a fragmented, racially unequal, and often oppressive justice system into one that was legitimate, accessible, effective, representative, accountable, and humane. Justice 2000 also contained a more explicit language agenda than is sometimes remembered. It identified technical procedures, unfamiliar terminology, and the use of English and Afrikaans as barriers to meaningful participation. It committed the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development to simpler court language, professional interpretation, translation into official languages, plain language legal documents, and the development of policy on the language of record. That program remains strikingly contemporary. Considerable progress has been made in representativity, constitutional jurisprudence, interpretation, and access to legal information. Yet the central contradiction persists. Indigenous languages are used extensively by court users, witnesses, and accused persons, while the authoritative record and the production of precedent remain overwhelmingly English. The system often permits people to enter the courtroom in their own language but requires the law to leave the courtroom in English. Justice Vision 2000 sought to transform the institutional infrastructure of justice. Our generation must deepen that project by transforming its linguistic and jurisprudential infrastructure. The Department of Justice and Constitutional Development's 2019 language policy strengthens this commitment, ensuring that the justice system is inclusive, accessible, and reflective of the voices of all. The language policy flows from the Use of Official Languages Act and aims to promote the equitable use of all 12 official languages, to regulate and monitor the use of official languages in the department, and to facilitate equitable access to the services offered by the department. It aims to promote good language management for efficient public service administration and service delivery, and facilitate access to services, resources, programs, information, and knowledge. Importantly, it seeks to redress the linguistic inequalities of the past, which resulted in the underdevelopment of indigenous African languages and discrimination against speakers of such languages. The policy is based on the following three broad guiding areas. Firstly, usage, practicality, expense, regional circumstances, the balance of needs and preferences of the population as a whole and in the province concerned. Secondly, the imperative to take practical and positive measures to elevate the status and advance the use of indigenous languages of historically diminished use and status. And thirdly, the provision of all official languages must enjoy parity of esteem and must be treated equitably. It acknowledges the demographics of the country in terms of human settlement caused by apartheid policies and the establishment of ethnic-based self-governing states prior to 1994. It mentions Mpumalanga specifically, stating that Mpumalanga, which incorporates the former self-governing territory, the KwaNdebele homeland, had isiNdebele as official language. As the Ndebele community is largely concentrated in Mpumalanga, the policy recommended that despite isiZulu being the most spoken language in the province, isiNdebele should be selected as the official language for use in the province. isiNdebele is the least spoken language in all other provinces, and failure to select it for Mpumalanga would result in its exclusion from official government use and substantively diminish its status as an official language. Courts are at the heart of the justice system, and court interpreters are amongst the most important, yet often least visible, professionals within the justice system. Until you watch the Madlanga Commission and you see a superstar interpreter in action. Court interpreters are they facilitate communication between judicial officers, prosecutors, legal practitioners, accused persons, witnesses, and members of the public. Without interpreters, many people would simply be unable to participate meaningfully in court proceedings. To give practical effect to the constitutional right to a fair trial, we've invested significantly in language services. We currently employ approximately 1,900 court interpreters across South Africa. In addition, we have a database of more than 500 ad hoc interpreters, including South African Sign Language interpreters and foreign language interpreters. Across all provinces, Shona is the most frequently requested foreign language, with certain provinces also needing translation into Chichewa, Amharic, and Igbo. This database of interpreters continues to grow as the demand for language services increases and shows our commitment to ensuring that courts remain accessible to everyone, regardless of the language they speak. Our interpreters make justice understandable and accessible. Their ongoing training and professional development is vital. In October of 2025, South Africa became the first country in the world to introduce the court interpreters robing program. This recognized court interpreters as professionals who play a direct role in protecting constitutional rights. Interpretation remains indispensable. However, we must progress from interpreting participation towards multilingual production. What then is to be done? Universities are often described as institutions that transmit knowledge, and I think the Vice-Chancellor made this point. But they also manufacture legal consciousness. They educate future judges, magistrates, advocates, attorneys, prosecutors, interpreters, legislative drafters, public servants, and academics. They determine which sources students regard as authoritative, which concepts they learn to articulate, and which languages they associate with intellectual seriousness. Oxford influenced the development of English law. Leiden shaped Roman Dutch jurisprudence. Stellenbosch, Potchefstroom, and Pretoria contributed greatly to legal Afrikaans. The University of Mpumalanga now faces a comparable historical question. Will it merely teach the legal languages that history has handed to it, or will it help create the multilingual jurisprudence that constitutional democracy requires? This is not a task for a language department alone, nor for a law faculty acting in isolation. It requires cooperation across linguistics, education, sociology, history, information technology, philosophy, public administration, and law. Dr. Makanya's focus on service delivery, Dr. Musara's on the economy, Dr. Nzioki's on media and communication, and Dr. Makubela on gender already demonstrate that language cannot be confined to a single academic silo. The legal meaning of language is shaped by the institutions through which people live. The future of indigenous languages will also depend on technology. Artificial intelligence, speech recognition, machine translation, and digital government services all require quality language resources. Languages that are not developed digitally risk being left behind. Partnerships, therefore, are vitally important and will become more so in future. Government must enter this partnership as more than a funder and more than a consumer of translation. It should help identify areas of public need, provide access to appropriate, non-confidential legal materials, support internships and terminology projects, and incorporate successful research into policy and practice. Government reinforces the importance of partnerships with institutions such as PANSALB, universities, the South African Centre for Digital Language Resources, and the judiciary to strengthen multilingualism across the justice sector. Through the Bridget Mabandla Justice College, our court interpreters continue to receive specialized training to ensure that they remain equipped for an evolving justice system. And other exciting projects and partnerships include the work being done by the South African Judicial Education Institute through, for example, its Traditional Leaders Mediation Training Program, which seeks to strengthen dispute resolution capacity within traditional leadership structures through the formalization and enhancement of mediation practices. A phased language implementation strategy has already been adopted to ensure inclusivity and accessibility, and the training manual will initially be translated into isiZulu, isiXhosa, and Setswana, with further languages to follow in subsequent phases. The Department of Justice, through the Bridget Mabandla Justice College, should seriously consider signing a memorandum of understanding with the University of Mpumalanga to strengthen the administration of justice. We believe a collaboration between the University of Mpumalanga, Sajay, and the Bridget Mabandla Justice College could create a national centre of excellence for justice sector education, research, and professional development. Such a memorandum of understanding could have a 5-year implementation plan built on the following 5 pillars. Firstly, education and training. Secondly, research and innovation. Thirdly, Indigenous languages and access to justice. Fourthly, digital justice. And fifth, community engagement and public legal education. Together, the University, Sajay and Justice College can create a seamless national learning pathway for future judicial officers and justice practitioners. Potential collaboration areas could include joint certificate programs, research on access to justice in Indigenous languages, interpreter and court language training, legislative drafting and plain language initiatives, judicial and prosecutor training in multilingual justice, student internships and work-based learning, and digital learning modules that can be shared nationally. Further projects could also be implemented between the Department, Justice College, Sajay, and the University. And that could include, firstly, a national justice education partnership to become a leading partnership for justice education, judicial development, research innovation, and multilingual access to justice. Each partner has a distinct role and responsibility. The University for academic qualifications, research, and student development, Sajay for judicial education and judicial expertise, and Justice College for professional development, public sector training, digital learning, and implementation across the justice sector. We could develop specialized justice programs together in the form of joint short courses or postgraduate certificates on Indigenous languages in the justice system, court interpreting and legal translation, plain language drafting of legal documents, customary law and constitutional law, access to justice in rural communities, and alternative dispute resolution rooted in Indigenous knowledge. The University provides academic expertise, Justice College provides justice practitioner expertise, and Sajay contributes the judicial perspective. There's also the possible establishment of a research hub. A collaborative research program could examine language barriers in court, access to justice, community justice systems, Indigenous legal knowledge, and justice innovation. This could produce policy papers and publications that directly inform the work of the department. We could also work towards a student pipeline in the justice sector. The department, through Justice College, could coordinate vacation and volunteer work, internships, workplace-based learning and exposure to courts, master's offices, state attorneys' offices, and family advocate offices. We could host annual justice dialogues, bringing together judges, prosecutors, magistrates, academics, students, traditional leaders, and legal practitioners with a focus on justice reform and contemporary legal challenges. Through the Indigenous Language Unit, housed in the department's library and Justice College, and working with the university, we could develop digital terminology in Indigenous languages, create multilingual court resources, produce legal dictionaries and glossaries, support interpreter training, research language and access to justice, and advise government on language policy in the justice sector. We could undertake capacity building for justice officials, with Justice College leading professional development for family advocates, clerks, registrars, court managers, interpreters, and legal administration officials, and the university contributing academic input. By combining the university's academic resources, Sajay's judicial expertise, and Justice College national training mandate, the partnership could make South Africa a leader in multilingual justice, education, and innovation. If you're worried, let me do away with your worry. I am about to conclude. And I want to conclude by making the point that the rising sun does not abolish the night by declaration. Light grows across the landscape. In the same way, a multilingual jurisprudence will be produced through accumulated work. One concept clarified, one interpreter trained, one student taught, one textbook written, one judgment translated, one database enlarged, and one institutional partnership sustained. As I said in the beginning in my declaration of intellectual interest, qualitative changes can in time become qualitative transformation. The late President Nelson Mandela once said, if you talk to a man in a language he understands, that goes to his head. If you talk to him in his own language, that goes to his heart. Language is the lifeblood of law. Without words, rights cannot be claimed, enforced, or protected. For justice to be real, it must be spoken in the languages of the people. Indigenous languages are not only cultural treasures, they are essential instruments of empowerment. 30 years after the adoption of the Constitution, our task is not merely to praise its multilingual promise. It's to build the institutions through which that promise can speak. Let us ensure that every language of our people can become a language not only in which justice is heard, but through which justice is imagined, reasoned, and made. Let this university, in the place of the rising sun, help lead that work. I thank you.
Another round of applause. Wow. What a speech. Deputy Minister, we want to thank you. We thank you for this encouraging and empowering speech that you just gave to us. I think I was sitting there and listening to you and saying, hey, he's going to blame us. When he started saying universities, I was saying he's now starting to point fingers at us. But then to realize that, no, we need each other to really build our multilingual, not only justice system, but we start small, as you said. But as we continue, we will see the impact that we make as we work together. And I was sitting there and saying to myself, those short courses you are referring to, we are having a center here that has just been launched on the 2nd of July. So the timing is perfect. We have law, LLB program that started. We only graduated the first group after 4 years, just this year. So the timing is perfect. And you know, the MOU is something that I think the VC will say, grab it with your 2 hands. We have short learning programs that we want. As a health worker, I also think about medical legal issues that you need to train our people to speak the language and use those terminology, because you know it's very difficult to get the right terminology. So on that note, I want to hand over to the DVC Research, Innovation and Internationalization to come and take the stage and continue with the process of involving our team of our discussants who will respond to the speech. I don't want to give you some thoughts, but I couldn't help it. And thank you very much, Deputy Minister. I think the speech is really relevant to us, came at the right time to address the challenges of our time. Honourable Deputy Minister, thank you once more. Let's welcome Professor Aldo to the stage.
Professor Davada Maselasele, thank you very much. And Deputy Minister, indeed, I think the intellectual context for our discussion that you have provided is profound. And I think in a very intellectual way, you showed us in an understandable way how complex our environment is. Because this is about much more than language. It is about ownership and identity, and a young country trying to be inclusive for the future. And these idiosyncrasies that we have retained, not only because of very long past history, but also our very painful and recent history, shows that there is a lot of work still to be done. We also want to thank you not only for the strategic vision that you provide in offering a range of partnerships, but also the depth and considered approach in the suggestions of these partnerships. Yes, our university is young. Tongue in the cheek, we don't call it a new university anymore. We're a young university now. And we constantly build on the excellence of this institution's academic project to forge new and innovative partnerships. And the framework that you have provided fits really well with not only our evolving prowess as a research-informed university, but certainly, as has been shown by our academics, led by Professor Davana Maselisele, our truly insightful and impactful academic project that we take forward. I want to lastly, just as an introductory comment, I don't want to say honor, but acknowledge the 10 theses that you have provided. It is a theoretical framework for, again, trying to assist us in understanding this profound complexity that we are in. So even though our law program is rather new, we have already seen the multidisciplinary contributions beyond that program, as you have listed them. And I think this framework of the 10 theses really provides us an opportunity to be very fundamental in how we consider our partnership approach going forward, what the content and value is of the programs that we deliver, and ultimately try and consider the impact that one wants to see, not only in this province, but for the university. So from my perspective also, Deputy Minister, thank you very much indeed. Colleagues, I want to make two suggestions. One, that we do not move, but we stand up for 5 minutes. And that you please greet every person that is your neighbor in a 360 manner. During the same time, may our 4 respondents please transition to the front, and we will continue then with their introductions and our open discussion. So please do not get rowdy. Just stand up for 5 minutes and refresh, and we will continue. May I ask the panelists to please come forward.
How are you? He said he must greet you. Are you?
I'm fine. Are you fine?
Yeah, you fine. I'm saying hi.
This is my son.
Thank you.
basically, that the Deputy Minister provided. We want to have an engagement with the audience, but we want to precede that by brief respondents from 4 perspectives. One is from the perspective of service delivery, one of the economy, media and communication, and very importantly, gender. And these are 4 important areas for us, colleagues, not only as it shapes the process of the university, but also what it implies in terms of impact areas when one speaks of language transformation and development. So it's really my pleasure to introduce to you, as per the program, the 4 respondents. All 4 are senior lecturers from the Faculty of Economic Development and Business Sciences, 2 from the School of Social Sciences, 1 from the School of Development Studies, and 1 from the School of Hospitality and Tourism. And that brings also, I think, a multidisciplinary perspective when we hear their short responses, upon which we will open then the discussions. So they are free to speak in any order that they prefer, but the first person is Dr. Tembelihle Makanya, who will speak on service delivery. Dr. Mazanai Musara will speak on the economy. Dr. Sam Nzioke will speak on media and communication. And our eminent Dr. Nomzwakazi Makuela, who will speak on gender. Colleagues, please join me in welcoming these 4 respondents to our panel. We indicated preference, but may I ask Dr. Makanya if you're prepared to go first, and you can remain there or you can come to the podium. Thank you, you are welcome.
Thank you so much. It won't make a difference, DVC, even if I stand up. Greetings, Nyabingelela. You know, the Honourable Deputy Minister, when I grow up, I want to be like you. Your naturalization of different languages instead of a language is really transformative. And thank you for a much thought-provoking and inspiring address today. Today you have really not only challenged our thinking, but also affirmed our identities. Your deliberate use of indigenous languages and your recognition that language carries far more than words, but it embodies our culture, our history, context, and a way of knowing. It's refreshing, and it's like you were here yesterday. Most importantly, it is assuring to hear a leader in a high office like yours to affirm the place of Africanity within the justice system through the recognition and the promotion of indigenous languages. And your message, Honourable Deputy Minister, remind us that if we are truly committed to justice, indigenous languages cannot remain confined to the cultural spheres, while English, for instance, continues to function as the language of power. And rather, indigenous languages must also become through which justice is experienced, and also the delivery of public services and recognition of human dignity is restored. Most particularly, Honourable Minister, your acknowledgement of our context here in Mpumalanga, our lovely place of the rising sun, further reinforces the importance of recognizing the linguistic reality of the communities we serve. It reminds us that justice is most meaningful when it speaks in the languages of the people. And particularly as a person who's working in higher education, your address prompted an important reflection that if we accept that language is central to equitable justice and effective service delivery, then advancing indigenous languages requires, honestly, a deliberate action across the entire justice ecosystem. And our context, higher education in particular, have a responsibility to prepare our graduates who can serve multilingual communities with competency, cultural humility, but most importantly, with so much respect. And your most important reflection to the Constitution, the linguistic commitment, for instance, the example that you made of the Chief Justice and the broader constitutional vision of multilingualism are encouraging, honestly. Equally important was also your acknowledgement of our painful history, where colonialism, imperialism, and apartheid it deliberately delegitimized the indigenous languages and the indigenous knowledges while advancing certain languages that are alien to our people. In this regard, the promotion of indigenous languages is not merely a linguistic exercise. It's indeed a true act of restorative justice. I become hungry for your conversation to speak more even to other services that are offered by the department in the entire ecosystem of the justice system. But most importantly, I appreciated your highlight of the possibilities of our context in higher education to work strategically with the department to strengthen this agenda rather than inventing the wheel. This suggests that the higher education institution can build on the initiatives already underway to prepare a new generation of professionals who are equipped to deliver justice and public services in the language of the people they serve. And ultimately, I hear, Deputy Honourable Minister, in your address, a call to move beyond a symbolic recognition, but in a society that is still shaped by colonial and apartheid legacies that has normalized hierarchy, exclusion, and normalization, to move to the advancement of indigenous languages, to never be seen as an exercise of mere checking the constitutional box, but as the one that needs to be embraced as a deliberate instrument of decolonial transformation, restorative justice, and people-centered services. Because when citizens can access justice in the languages through which they think, reason, and live, we move closer to the constitutional promise of dignity, equity, and meaningful access to justice and services for all. Thank you so much.
Dr. Makanya, thank you very much for the insightful response. Colleagues, if you want to take a seat, we'll ask the ushers to indicate the open seats that are here. So please feel free to come in. I very much like your focus that you have indicated on the deliberateness that is required in terms of our actions. Our interconnectedness also is way beyond only a Department of Justice and Constitutional Development, a university, other department. It really is a systemic and systematic approach that is required to bring us this, as you have rightly indicated, a renewal, the new generation of multidisciplinary academics, professionals, implementers for this transformation that we are looking for. Thank you very much, Dr. Makanya. Dr. Musara, from an economic perspective?
Yes, thank you, Program Director. Honourable Deputy Minister, thank you very much for your very insightful and intellectually rich public lecture. When you opened your speech in Jivenda, it went straight to my heart. Because I understand Jivenda very well. Your reflection on indigenous languages and the justice systems are not only limited to the constitutional rights. And as you rightly put it, languages acquire power because institutions give them power. So I want to extend the discussion to the role of indigenous languages in the economy. Africa needs all the resources that it has. It has natural resources. It has the human capital. It has its people. It has its rich heritage. And it has its languages. It is home to over 3,000 languages, that's according to UNESCO. So we celebrate our linguistic diversity, but our institutions ignore our languages. As you rightly pointed when you were talking about your intellectual declarations, that you are addressing the public lecture in English, yet you are talking about indigenous African languages. This is where we're missing an opportunity to promote our indigenous African languages. Because institutions give language power, the launch of the Asikoteni yesterday is a right step towards promoting indigenous African languages for them to gain a seat on the table in the linguistic market, because it's time for us to give our languages not just in the legal system, the space, but also in all institutions of higher learning. So despite the richness of Africa in terms of its linguistic diversity, our institutions ignore the power of languages as economic resources. As I mentioned, that Africa needs all its resources. So it is time for us to start to promote our languages to gain a space in the linguistic market. We should begin to recognize indigenous African languages as economic assets, because languages create value, they shape markets, they reduce transactional costs, they determine who can participate meaningfully in economic activity, and more importantly, they facilitate trust. As you rightly mentioned, quoting Nelson Mandela, if you speak to a man in a language that he understands, it goes to his head. But if you speak to a man in his own language, it goes to his heart. And that builds trust. That builds a bonding relationship that is important in business. So languages, using indigenous languages, is important for us to create bonding relationship. People make better decisions when information is presented in a language that they fully understand. And this applies to business regulation, government support programs, policies, customer rights, financial products, contracts, and many other institutional arrangements. When citizens cannot fully comprehend these important programs, they are excluded systemically, not only from the justice system, but also from economic opportunity. This is particularly important in the South African context, where the informal economy feeds millions of our people. People in our communities conduct business in indigenous local languages, in Tshivenda, in Sizulu, in Sesotho, but the programs that are meant to support them, they are presented to them in English. And this creates a barrier for them to access these opportunities, because they don't fully understand what is being offered to them. Honourable Deputy Minister, the development of African languages within the justice system has significant economic benefits, as you rightly pointed. A business owner who understands commercial contracts in their home language, it goes to the heart, is less vulnerable to exploitation because they understand every word. A farmer who understands land rights can better protect the productive assets that we need for Africa's development. A consumer who understands legal rights is more confident to participate in the marketplace, and that has ripple economic benefits. In this manner, access to justice through inclusive language policies strengthen economic participation and ultimately the much needed economic development in our African context. Just to wrap up my response, an investment in indigenous African languages is not only necessary for the preservation of our heritage, our identity, but also it is an investment into Africa's economic future. Thank you very much, Deputy Minister, for the wonderful presentation.
Dr. Misara, thank you indeed. You are an economist by training, and we were expecting your very structured economic outlook. You provided that because it's important. It shows the relationality that is necessary to conduct business, but it links back to what Dr. Makanya has indicated, that the interconnectedness is not only in terms of streams of business, but there are various different role players that brings forward for us to bring efficiency in the value chain. Colleagues, if you're not aware, Dr. Misara is also coordinating currently the Energy Transition Hub of the University of Mpumalanga that has been established at the end of last year. And I think that has brought an appreciation not only in this province, but as we address notions of transition in business, in mining, in migration, in labor, in employment, of how important understanding this transition is and how we speak to each other and how everyone can be included. Thank you very much for your perspective. Dr. Makulbela, we would be very interested to hear your profound responses, also framed yesterday to the Deputy Minister's lecture from a gender perspective. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Program Director. Honourable Minister, thank you so much for the insightful reflection on the language, the use of language, especially in the justice system. Actually, your remarks remind us that language is not a mere means of communication, but it is a vehicle through which power, identity, rights, and justice can be negotiated. From the lecture, what I picked up was that justice begins with power, with language. That's what I picked up, because the words that we speak can either silence the survivors or empower them. So in your lecture, I really identified with the theory of Justice Pius Langa, which talks about transformative constitutionalism, which also embeds, linguistic transformation. I think that is so relevant, not only to the justice system, but also to all other institutions that we live within. So from a gender perspective, of course, I would like to say that we are still caught up and trapped within the language that reinforces patriarchal systems. Starting from the household, we still have the proverbs, for instance, the language that is used within those, the family itself, still, perpetuating inequalities. Still, it, also breeds toxic masculinities. So much as we are aware that the justice system is going so far in transforming the space, we still need to go to the very micro, element of our society, which is the family. So that change doesn't only take place at a policy level, So we need also to make sure that it changes starting from there, because that is where we actually get the attitudes, that breed gender-based violence in our society. So if language has the power to shape justice and other institutions of the society, I think we should also use it actually as a powerful instrument for transformation. So it means that we don't only need to transform the language itself, but we transform it in order to use it to transform other institutions, starting from the family itself. So I really appreciate, Justice Elanga's theory, which can be so instrumental even as we transform our spaces in totality. So as I was sitting there thinking, I was wondering that language is very powerful. And it has been very powerful in sustaining the patriarchal norms. And if that is the case, I'm sure we can also equally, use it, to promote respect, to promote equality, to promote accountability and non-violence within our spaces. So I think it would be a good move for, every institution to invest, as you suggested, in language, in actually offering language and taking into consideration that the indigenous language is important. Invest in that and use it within our spaces and in all other institutions. I would like to end there. Thank you.
Colleagues, Dr. Makubela has reminded us that justice, from her perspective in her response, begins with language. And we have learned a lot yesterday, Deputy Minister, not that it is part of her full response today, about how pervasive this notion of reinforcing patriarchy actually still is in our society, and the role that language plays in taking that forward. You're almost suggesting a cascading system of transformation that we would want to make use of to address the multidimensional and multifaceted challenge framework that we have. Dr. Makubela, thank you very much. Dr. Nzioke, we're very pleased to welcome you and ask for your response.
Okay, thank you very much, Deputy Minister, VC. I'll begin by quoting the words that you finished your speech with, that the rising sun does not just banish the night by decree. And what that communicates for me, it's not just an incremental process. It's a mutual arising, if I might put it that way, a mutual arising of all these elements of culture, language, the meanings in them, and not just mutual arising. There's a deeper, difficult process that is, I call it restless transactions. or entanglement. Because if we were to take that analogy across the board with what we do, the process of decolonization tends to become difficult when we speak and we don't have the grammar that speaks of these restless transactions between, do we just banish all the laws, the ideas that don't belong to what we'd call Africanity? Then what do we end up having? It's not that simply binary. And that opened for me a bigger question of the media, because the media cuts across all these areas we are speaking about. For instance, today, the media is not just a means of communicating and sending messages. The media is so entangled with our everyday lives. We wake up every day and everyone has medium on their hands. So you're not listening just to the BBC, you're listening to SABC or whatever channel, but you're also listening to your influencer. You're listening to someone who says whatever you want to hear. You're gathering young people don't consume messages of everything, including legal issues, from expert opinion. They listen to other people. And so that to me is a very important point, this mutual arising, especially in the legal space, where we have all manner of experts, all manner of voices. How do we begin to bring the right concepts into a conversation of how we interpret legal issues? For instance, what's going on with Medanga Commission? Most people are consuming it through the media. They are not there present. And you wait in the evening for an analyst to tell you what is going there. So what are these concepts that we use? And I like when you say the whole process of a responsive jurisprudence is one of reflection, renewal, and recommitment. And this recommitment is a recommitment that, like you said, the Justice Manisamaya said, has to be an imperative. So that being the case, I'll just pose a situation because that's what the media does, it probes. I live in a suburb. I didn't move there long ago. And recently, actually in December, and I have it here in my phone, a debate erupted and it became very bitter. One of my neighbors decided to have umsebenzi. People call it all manner of names, ritual, cleansing, others call it ancestor worship now. When that happened, this person decided to go and follow the bylaws. They had to inform their councillor, who's a DA councillor, and the whole area is really an AfriForum area. And they got angry. A lot of the neighbors started sending messages and collecting all manner of, quotes, media quotes from other places of how in Sebens, the work, especially the act of slaughtering, is cruelty to animals. And they lashed out. And the more the councillor told them, but this person has just complied with the law. They said, but that law is wrong. It is cruelty to animals. And the poor guy kept on saying, no, this is not just ancestor worship the way you think it. It's not just cruelty to animals. There's something much deeper to it. In the end, it all got lost in the debate. And I look at our Constitution, in Chapter 2, a Bill of Rights, Section 15 on freedom of religion, belief, and opinion. That seems not to be a message that is communicated well by the municipalities. And if the imperative for constitutional, for justice and a responsive jurisprudence is one that serves to the greatest extent without, trouncing the rights of others, surely that kind of messaging at the level where it matters, which is the municipality, would be important. Because my question was, if I want to perform umsebenzi, does that mean I have to go to my rural areas? Or does that mean I should not move to, or we can't slaughter in suburban areas anymore? And that follows also with the issue of just the last note, and it was quite hilarious. One other neighbor decided to come with chicken. And the cockerel, confused, began to crow at 11 in the evening. And they reminded this person, no, the bylaws say you can't keep cockerels in our area, and that's it. She had to take all of them away. Unfortunately, she wasn't honest. She left a few chickens and they went through the neighbor's door and the dog started chasing the small chicks. And of course, then the social media thing started again. You lied to us. Our dogs can't sleep. They almost ate your chicken. You want it to become a legal issue. So just to wrap up, the messaging, at least at the level where it matters, which is the municipal level where people live, there should be, I believe, a jurisprudence that is responsive, more messaging that responds to some of these things in concepts that do not deny cultural expression as safeguarding the Constitution, their place. Thank you.
Sam, thank you very much. You've put a humorous slant to the discussion, but it doesn't detract from the importance. We're speaking about more than language, colleagues. It is also about the understanding of what is being said, regardless of the language used. So the messaging, the interpretation, the association with that message. And it shows aspects of identity, of transition, of transformation, if you will. I'm very pleased that you've brought that perspective. Colleagues, please help me thank the 4 respondents. And before we open to the audience, I want to ask Deputy Minister, do you want to respond briefly to some of the responses at this stage? Perfect. Perfect. And Vice Chancellor, would you want to make a few comments at this stage on some of the responses?
Thank you. Thank you, Prof. Strubel, for this, and I must thank the Minister for what came through to me as speeches, lectures, rather than just one. It was so packed that I hope and am in belief that because we're recording, we're going to be able to package this not just only for the consumption of UMP, but for the World Wide Web. That it gets to be accessed beyond our lives, and that it got to be seen beyond that. In taking notes, I just want to look at, possibly maybe too early for now, Prof. Strubel, I don't know. But for me, it was where to from here. Taking a leaf from your talk, it was actually about, you've made reference to constitutional transformation in the language that should be just, not just for the justice system, but that we need to be looking at how we manage the fact that English continues to be a dominant legal language for proceedings. And therefore, you've called us to reason that out, but reason it out in terms of action, and the action is what transformation is necessary. This was my pickup from your talk in terms of you calling us to transform. I've also picked up in terms of the call to action, the collaboration that you've called us upon to work on. And your reference to Justice Mabandla's college, and that embarrassingly, I didn't even know the college exists, but it calls to us to check on, even as a university having graduated quite a number of lawyers and having connections with the Mpumalanga Legal Council right now, how do we connect to that? So you called us to collaborate, you've made reference to MOUs that are necessary, and you've asked that we need to be also, which is what my colleagues have also made reference to, the multidisciplinarity. That really stood quite firm in my heart in terms of access to justice will not only be achieved through justice systems, but also through the multidisciplinary disciplines that we have, but using language, because of all of us, it is the text that we're using. What also stood out for me was, which I grappled with so much, the artificial intelligence that you made reference to in your talk. You actually made reference to how do we get AI support, not just research, but get the South African indigenous languages to be incorporated. We've forever and ever been hearing about how AI is an equalizer. It is really an equalizer? I don't know. What kind of contribution do indigenous languages have in constructing AI? Who construct AI? When we post onto the AI platforms what we post, what do we get out of it? How much do we lose in doing that? Should we be stopping posting things there? What are our AI formations and data generation that we get into here? So it got me thinking, and therefore it is a call for our data center that we actually have through, of course, the high computing systems in terms of generating our own systems that will speak to our own kind of what we want to expect from your reference to. Let's just grab all of this from our ends and action it out. You've also made reference to developing legal terminology. And I was very humbled to learn of the number of translators that you actually have. And I'm thinking that it's calling for us to make a contribution there as well, in particular those that are actually following what's happening in the Madlanga Commission right now in terms of those that translate or rather interpret in ways that leaves us rolling eyes, but also the emotive forms of some of the translators wherein they really take it from the person who's expressing what they need to express to really live it out as the Madlanga commissioner himself was making reference to. So all in all, I'm looking at beyond what your speeches have called us to do, but what transformational actions we need to operationalize to ensure that we implement these calls, these kind of takeaways that you've given to us to ensure that we have the kinds of programs, collaborations, and the transformation that goes just beyond the issue of representation, but calling to action what we need to be putting into action to change for the impact of what will be realized not just by us as the university and as middle class people, but beyond to those that don't even have seen the sight of a university.
Indeed. Professor Mayiwa, thank you very much. I think a very valuable contribution in framing and distilling out the key aspects for us to focus on. Are you ready now, Deputy Minister? Please continue.
Thank you very much. And let me just start by really thanking the panel, the discussants, and, well, actually, to start off, firstly, just thanking the Vice-Chancellor and the university again for the opportunity to be here and to engage. And to thank the discussants, I think, for very, very perceptive comments and suggestions. And I think just the way that the university has approached taken in approaching the panel discussion, I think already accords with a lot of both the content but also the methodology that I've adopted. And the point is that there's no one particular social phenomenon that can be understood in isolation from others. And I think that it's I deliberately went through that to also engage with students, because I think very often one finds yourself in an environment where you are taught things, and over time universities, there's a particular approach to knowledge which treats knowledge as if they are separate segments of reality. So you study mathematics, or you study physics, or you study law or economics, and those are almost regarded as separate continents from each other. It was a dilemma that I faced after finishing school, because I had an equal interest in both natural sciences and social sciences. And I wanted to find ways of combining those. So in my first year at UCT, I studied mathematics and philosophy, French and anthropology. I had wanted actually to study mathematics, physics, and philosophy. But at that time, it was just as if I was talking things that are mad. At one of the universities that I went to, they said, yes, but which faculty will give you your degree? And I think that approach of taking issues of gender, of the economy, of media, and bringing them to bear on this subject, I think sends a very, very powerful message. Maybe, Vice-Chancellor, to touch upon your point around artificial intelligence and to, through that, also touch upon some of the other points made here. One of the points that I was trying to make in the lecture is that a phenomenon like language is something that one can't understand separate from economic development. And I referred to the initial phases of colonization, to then later the discovery of gold and diamonds, how that gave rise to a particular economic structure, which then required a particular legal system, and out of that then also a particular legal language. So it's really an appeal that when we talk about these issues, we can't talk about them as if they exist outside of a particular context. And that's what introduces the complexity into the debate, is exactly that intimate intertwining. So it sounds very good to say, let's abolish English and replace it. The question is, what has given rise to the prominence of English? Are those conditions still there? If they're there, we can't simply act voluntaristically and hope that the world's going to change because we want the world to change. We must understand those dynamics and those conditions. And my question would be, we're entering a phase in our technological and economic development where artificial intelligence is playing a bigger and bigger role by the day. What does that mean for the structure of the economy? And it ties then also into the questions of the media, because the media is also not constant. I mean, when I started studying, one of my first areas of activity in the student movement was in journalism, student journalism. Now, at that time, to produce a student newspaper took us the whole weekend. We spent a weekend, we took stories, we typed them onto an electric typewriter that printed out these long strips of paper, which we cut, and we took wax and we rolled. We designed the paper with pens, and then we stuck the waxed papers down. To make a headline, you put, do you guys know what letraset is? No. So we scratched out a headline on letraset, and then to make it fit, you would go to the dark room. Now, I then worked as a student journalist at one of the big newspapers as well. Those forms of media have changed radically. I mean, when I went to Parliament in 1994, there were probably no less than 20 people in the parliamentary press gallery. Each newspaper had its own political correspondent. Then they said, okay, let's the big groups, the independent newspapers started getting less and less. They formed themselves into big conglomerates. Why do we each need a political correspondent if we can have one person writing for all of us? The impact of that then is that systematically over time, you've got less of a diversity of views. You also have, and I don't say this disrespectfully to anyone, but you also have a juniorization of your newsrooms. People don't have a background and a framework within which to interpret. Now with the advent of social media, I mean, it's that news just, there's no time to sit and reflect, to analyze, because it's all now. I'm taking this detour to make the point that those technologies also influence the way in which economies work and the place of language in economy. Of course, like any phenomenon, and I tried to illustrate that through the thesis, there are contradictions. And things are independent, and the way those contradictions play out and resolve themselves are double-edged. So bringing the question of the Vice-Chancellor to bear on this, at one level, artificial intelligence is being developed primarily in English. That poses a threat to indigenous languages. On the other hand, it opens great possibilities. If you can achieve that almost instantaneous translation or interpretation, does it not create space for inclusivity and greater use of more languages that can be almost effortlessly? The question, though, is who determines on what terms that interpretation and translation takes place. And if we are not in the game, we are going to be out of the game. So those are just, it's one of the areas that the Department of Justice is also looking at. I mean, at the moment, we've still got technology that's quite outdated. I mean, we've got court recording systems and stuff that you probably have more sophisticated and powerful software on your phone than we have in our courts. And so we're saying that there's a lot of scope for us to render much better, quicker, efficient services through that technology. But if we don't have the backup of the multidisciplinary collaboration that we were talking about, in the partnerships with universities, we might be entering into a terrain that will come back later to bite us. Thanks.
Colleagues, profound comments and feedback. We are aware of our time. We thank you for your fortitude in retaining interest. If you won't mind, we will allow 3 questions, and I would then ask the respondents to have brief responses to those, and end then with a final response from the Deputy Minister. May I ask that you introduce yourself, please, before you speak, and to keep the question or comment succinct. So I have a number 1 on that side. I have no woman so far. Let's take number 2 on this side, and we're reserving the 3rd one for a woman, if you don't mind. So go ahead.
Greetings, everybody, ladies, gentlemen, members of the LGBTQIA community. Ladlam Tobis speaking, Master of Science and Agriculture, down there at Building 6. So I would like to first off appreciate the profound opportunity to be in this presence. Democracy truly is working for us. Mine is also building on the Vice-Chancellor and the Deputy Minister's talk on technology and its utilization in terms of reform as well as, but mine is mostly on outreach. I would like to challenge both the uni and the ministry to, or the department rather, to utilize social media to reach the youth, because a lot of us don't know the Constitution. A lot of us can't even sing the entirety of the national anthem. So I would like to request that social media be used to reach the youth, because that's where we mostly are, us as young people. Because the reform, without actually passing it on to the next generation, will be like Sisyphus pushing up the boulder for eternity. Every generation will have to restart. So please use the tools that are available, your social media, your artificial intelligence, and use it in the way that we are going to engage, not just a post of pictures and a communique caption and then that's it. Make those TikTok challenges, engage us, so that we know what's happening, what the Constitution is as the supreme law of the land. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I can't resist to say that you must put that challenge to the university as well, not just to the ministry. We had colleagues, we had the second person right here and the third person on the left. Thank you.
Sanbonani, my name is Owechum Chomboti, a second year student doing Bachelor of Arts in Media, Communications and Culture. So what I can say is that we as Africans, we express ourselves through idioms and proverbs. My question is that with all the idioms and proverbs created through indigenous language that can tend to concentrated hegemony of patriarchy, what is the foundation that incubates them, and what is the transformation that can be implemented or made to decolonize Africans from this, to decolonize Africans starting within the university?
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're taking a second to internalize that very interesting question. Thank you, sir. Madam? So, I'm sorry, sir. Madam?
Sanbonani. I'm not sure if it's still Macheroni or Masiari. Dumelang, Afsheni. I'll just be brief, as Prof. Strobel has said. Kamalam nginglindelwa sibonga kangosi ngi-lecturer la University of Mpumalanga, Department of Culture and Heritage Studies. Ngifundzisa iMpumalanga in context ne-culture and heritage studies. So umbuto wami mfishane kakhulu angati noma panelist yethu itawukhona yini kuwubamba uma ngitawubuta ngeSiswati. Kodwa ke njengoba Honourable Deputy Minister naye beseka disclose le conflict of interest ukuthi sibuthene la akakhoni ku deliver le speech sakhe ngelanguage lenaye emvunako. So I'll try my best ukuthi ngibeke ngelwimi naylatalvisis. So my question is very simple to Honourable Minister, is that Minister, is the department ready to fund and support initiatives that are ready to develop indigenous languages and also promote them, especially in a digital era? Is the department ready to fund such initiatives? As we've already spoken about AI, we've already spoken about the use of indigenous languages in education, we've spoken about service delivery and everything, the media. We have people, we have students who are ready to take on indigenous languages, promote them. We have students in BICT who are ready to develop applications that can ensure that indigenous languages survive in this digital age that we are currently in. So my question is basically on the funding part. Is the department ready to fund such initiatives? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, I greatly apologize for having to truncate our discussion. We are under severe time pressure. I know that there's many speakers, and we want to actually ask response to this very interesting set of questions that touches on a range of aspects that we've discussed. So with your permission, let's reflect on the responses from the respondents first. You can address, colleagues, any of the facets that you would want to, and then we'll take in that way. Shall we start, Sam, with you, if you want to respond?
Oh, okay, thank you. I think I'll respond to the question that was asked about social media. Of course, it's a challenge to the university to begin there. I do acknowledge that, and the minister already pointed out, the young people don't consume information any other way other from their social media platforms. And of course, it then becomes a challenge upon us, including academics like me, to find ways to integrate how I interact, not just for the disciplinary aspects. Something the minister said that's quite important, that you never, whereas universities and institutions like this, for practical reasons, will separate modes of learning, disciplinary fields into different spaces. You'll never meet somebody who's a mathematician greeting you, 2 + 2 is 4, as a greeting. No, they're human. They engage with you as a human being first. And so our task, and I'll just say we'll have to take it on because it's a challenge, finding ways to integrate our modes of teaching with social media interaction platforms. I believe, and I know we can do so.
Yeah. For me, also that will bring a fundamental change because it's part of the academic project already. Nancy Kwasi?
Yes, thank you. I'll respond to this. I think it was the third question, the second question, which talks about Proverbs from, yeah, it's all right. Yes, one thing that I want to let you know, if you're not aware, is that language is dynamic. It is not static. So I know in most cases what we want to hold on to what we know or what we learned from home or wherever. But the thing is, with social change, as we go through life, things change. We have to, the language has got to change with social change to remain relevant. Otherwise, if we stick to the language that was developed a long time ago, which suited people at that particular time, and which doesn't suit us now, then it's a problem. So with the language, just like with culture, you know, those are dynamic. So as time goes on, you pluck out that which does no longer work at the time and put in something new that, you know, is relevant for today's life. So I just want to say to you, it is possible to change the language, and it is going to change. Actually, it's changing as we are talking, and it's still going to change for future generations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Makubela. I appreciate your insight. I want to ask Mazanai then for his remarks.
Yes, thank you very much. I want to respond to the social media, I think, proposition. It wasn't a question. And I want to throw it back at the youth and say, social media provide a good platform for us to promote our indigenous African languages. Yet we find our youth there promoting the colonial language, doing their skits in English instead of doing them in our indigenous African languages, and also to promote them in order for them to gain a space in the linguistic market. So I'm challenging the youth to say, while you are on your social media, use the platform effectively also to promote our indigenous African languages. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I feel like there's a challenge fund coming forward under Safari that we can consider thinking aloud. Tabilite?
Thank you very much. On the question on the decolonial debate and how do we decolonize our university by making sure that our transformation doesn't lose the identity of our communities from one of the speaker. I really think there is no one size fit all for this one. I think it's a matter of willingness and deliberate inclusivity and access, and it doesn't have an owner, that kind of engagement. The students, the staff, and everyone in our higher education institution is the participant. And we start even in the micro activities that we do at the university in our teaching. as we discussed yesterday, how do we make sure that the kind of language, the kind of examples that we use, they are relevant to our society and our context, and we move to our research, our community engagement, and the way we engage in terms of administration. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Professor Miyiwa, your fundamental final words for this panel.
Probably it's not a fundamental final word, just to thank the organizers. I did not realize that this 2 days was going to turn out to be such a bomb. It is wanting to carry us to a different future, but a future that starts with questioning ourselves in terms of what are our contributions and what we want to see going into the future. So I just want to commend the organizers without wanting to contribute any further, lest I spoil all the good contributions that have been made.
Thank you very much. And then, Deputy Minister, our pleasure to ask you for your remarks. All of this is informed by the lecture that you've provided.
No, thank you very, very much. And may I add my voice of appreciation to all of those who helped organize this event. We know that these events don't just happen. They are made to happen. And they require a lot of time, a lot of effort, and the contribution by many, many different people. Some of them are very prominent and they shine, others are in the background, but without their contribution, others won't shine. So thank you to all. I'd like to answer or respond to two issues. The first is the very important but also very directly put question as to whether the department is ready to fund. I think from what I indicated in my input, I think the first point to make is that the role of government should not just be as a funder, as important as that is, because we understand that the direction of public resources can have a huge influence in the overall project of transforming our country. But it shouldn't be limited to that. We say that we are seeking to build a developmental state. Now, the essence of a developmental state is that it must be rooted in society and all sectors of society, yet at the same time retain the autonomy that it needs to run on behalf of the people, the state as a whole. So a developmental state must be rooted in and have a dynamic relationship with universities without seeking to control or to impinge upon the autonomy of universities. It must be rooted in the economy, but have a relatively autonomous and embedded autonomy, some scholars call it. We must be talking to business people. We must know what the businesses are that they're trying to develop, where the state can play a role in the development of those businesses without the state becoming captured by those interests. And therefore, I think one of the roles that a developmental state must play is to spell out a societal agenda. And I think that in a small and a modest way is what I try to do in this context. But also from that input, it should be clear that that is not just setting an agenda and identifying tasks. It's doing it by way of partnership in which the resources of both the department, the Judicial Education Institute, the Bridget Mabandla Justice College, together with the university, can bring its resources together. So the short answer is yes, and I think that should be clear. All of those things are backed in one way or another by resources. If if your question is whether there's a big pot of money sitting somewhere in the Department of Justice just waiting to be splashed around, unfortunately, I'm going to have to disappoint you. But what I was referring to in terms of partnerships, entering into memoranda of understanding, joint programs, yes, those things are backed by resources. The second issue I want to speak to is the issue of communication, but one aspect of it. Because you touch upon the issue of the role of social media and communication in the promotion of multilingualism. I want to link that to one of the things that we did earlier, and that is the reciting of the preamble to the Constitution. And it's really an appeal or a challenge to the university, but also to yourselves as students, is in the language of generations younger than myself to normalize that practice of reciting the preamble to the Constitution. And I think it's very important for where we are at the moment as a nation. We're in a world where internationally there are very, very powerful countries, very, very powerful leaders of very powerful countries who've made it very clear that they fundamentally disagree with the values that are contained in our Constitution. And that's one of the reasons why South Africa as a country is being isolated and being threatened, because everything that we stand for is what they don't stand for. And there's a full-on assault on the values of the Constitution. Assault on the values of the rule of law, of constitutionalism, but also just basic concepts of human solidarity, of fairness, of equity. Even the concept of gender is under sustained attack. It's regarded as a crazy concept to just use the word gender. And for that reason, it's important for us as a country continuously to reaffirm our commitment to those values. And those are very very, very noble ideals, which we fought long and hard for, and are the ideals that can take us to the destination that we want to. Secondly, we also must realize that we are at a very delicate stage in the development of our country, where there are some very real threats to our constitutional democracy. There's a rising tide of populism. There's a rising tendency for us to retreat into our respective identities at the cost of that which brings us together. We say that we are a nation united in our diversity. But at the moment, if we're honest to each other, the forces of diversity seem to be gaining ascendancy over the forces of unity. And for that reason, that concept of one constitution, one nation is very, very important for us to remind ourselves that we are indeed one nation with a lot of diversity and a lot of complexity, but we are one nation. Which I conclude by then saying is that if we were to recite that preamble over and above the reinforcement of those values, I've found that it has a small, very modest, but I think contribution to make towards multilingualism. Just reciting those last lines of the preamble in many of the different languages of our country, I find that many people start struggling after the first 3 or 4 languages. Many people run into problems with Mudzimu Patuchedza Africa. And my question is to say, if we're not as a nation even able to say, God protect our country in all of its languages, I think that's a very serious indictment. And I think it's one thing that through that recitation, one might want just to see that at least all of us can say those few words in all of our languages. Thanks.
Thank you. Deputy Minister, colleagues, a couple of concluding remarks. Number one, thank you very, very much for bringing us into a group for reciting the preamble of the Constitution. I don't think many people in this room has done that before. And it also focuses on the aspect that we're not just speaking about language, we're speaking about a much broader concept of what it means to feel belonging and identity and going forward. I have rarely heard such diplomatic speak in terms of the disdiversity discussion that's currently going on that you have brought. But we know what you're speaking of. And step by step, this university will serve as an example to not do that and to embrace diversity and inclusivity as an intellectual process going forward. And if every university can do that, I think there's already a large movement. I think we must consider, colleagues, and this is a challenge for our university, how we approach our knowledge constructs at the university. This has been clearly identified as one of the areas of focus. It is much more than multi, inter, and transdisciplinarity. It is about a fundamental reset of our academic projects and what we see as the outcomes of those knowledge constructs. Secondly, our technological intellectualism, I don't think, is innovative enough. And that also has been mentioned numerous times. So as we have this opportunity as a new university with extremely innovative students and excellent staff, let us try and transform this intellectualism with respect to technology so that we can have positive aspirations. Thirdly, our collaborative ecosystem, I think, is advanced but not nearly sophisticated enough for us to make use of the plethora of opportunities that are offered continuously. And that has been one of the key indicators of the success in teaching and learning, in research and innovation and internationalization, and really this transitioning, re-identification, if you will, of the university. But it will continue because there's also an external need of what the type of role it is that a university like ours can play in partnering for innovation. Minister, finally, I'm very pleased to pre-announce, if you will, that on 3 September, we'll be having the first inaugural annual lecture of Nokutula Simelane on gender. And on the same day, we will announce the establishment of the Nokutula Simelane Center for Gender and Intersectional Studies. I assume all the academics will still approve this through the academic process lying ahead, but it has been having to serve at Senate still. But I want to really acknowledge the key driver that Dr. Masuka has been in bringing this to the university. And I'm mentioning this very specifically because this also implies a lot of the transition, colleagues, that this university, even though new, has been or will still go through for inclusivity and when we speak to each other to understand what we mean. And it's not only honoring this transitory fundamental icon of our own transition and identity, but it is also using that framework for us to renew and retain our impact going forward. I want to ask the panel to remain here until the end of the proceedings. Thank you very much, again, colleagues, for your valuable contribution.
Professor Strubel, thank you very much. What would we do without you? Thank you. Appreciate the work that you have done with the team. And I'm sure the Deputy Minister realized that there were people who were really listening. And the respondents actually are making an impact and saying to us, maybe DVC teaching and learning, you should go back and look at your graduate attributes. and say, what else do we add on those graduate attributes? Because with the RRR, we have not spoken about the language and the ability to interact with the communities. Professor Dr. Makanya, I'm sure you'll agree with me on that. Or if you go into the community, you should know and understand their culture. It's when you understand that you are able to help them. So with that, can we applaud them, appreciate the work they've done, and say, as an academic institution, we are here to take the process forward. It will not end here. It's even going to the classroom. And when they present their portfolios, they will be the first ones to be checked on whether they preach and do what they have preached. Because we don't want them to say, listen to me, but don't look at how I do things. We want them to see them practicing what they have preached. On that note, I will request, without waste of much of your time, I will request the DVC responsible for postgraduate studies, engagement, and planning to come and propose a vote of thanks. Over to you.
Madam Vice Chancellor, thank you for the opportunity for me to stand here and give thanks to everybody who has participated here on your behalf. First and foremost, this is an element of pride that makes me to stand before you and say, in addition to my role as Deputy Vice Chancellor responsible for postgraduate studies, engagement and planning, this topic that is being discussed, I have a degree of ownership for it, Minister. I'm the board chair of the National Lexicography Unit here at the University of Mpumalanga. It's called the Silulu Sesiswati. So there's, so I'm a champion in this area, Minister, and I'm sorry to blow my own whistle because nobody did. So without further ado, I want to borrow the protocol as the Vice Chancellor has followed it and pronounced it, and say, all protocol observe. Welcome, Deputy Minister. You are my second favorite person in this subject. The first one is the ambassador of Germany, as she is going back. It really warms my heart to see people who love people and learn their language. It's really an area that many people cannot touch very easily. So he is first because he was first, but you are my second favorite person. My job here is actually to thank the participants and everyone else who have made this a success. First and foremost, I would like to recognize and thank senior management of the university, the VC and the DVCs for a job well done. Aldo. Manco as a whole, who also helped in support of this event to come through. I would like to recognize Professor Pago, and I'm following my own sequence here. So, Professor Pago, the Dean of the Faculty of Economics and Development and Business Sciences. I would like to thank also the part that was played today and agreeing to come to this meeting by the representative of traditional leadership. Somebody I call my friend and somebody we work very well together, and a visitor. Thank you. I also would like to thank the respondents that are sitting here. And these are people that are very familiar to me. Some of them we work together to write up the language policy. And they've been champions all the time. They never disappointed. So I would like you to give them an applause. Well done. This is what UMP is. And also I would like to go further and say I would like to thank the planning committee of this lecture. And you will agree with me, it was well organized. And recognize its leader, who is a friend of mine I call Sbo, but it is Dr. Masugu. Thank you very much for the organizing of this lecture. I was never bothered. Nobody said, hey, Professor Bewe, this is what, because you are on top of it. So, thank you. The coordinator of the technical plans, who is one of my people in the division, Miss Patience Mortar. I just want to say thank you to you in that even though the work, together with other things that you have to do in your division, you said was too much, but you continue to do it. So thank you. Thank you, Patience. Then the research team. I'm talking about the research officer sitting next to Dr. Ntite there. Thank you very much for your team in participation and preparation of this function. I've already thanked your boss about the work that was done. You pulled it very well. And also just facilitating, the interactions here and the responses. It was well done. And then I would like to thank the language translators, in particular Mr. Pete Masilela. I met him outside. Where is he? Is he still here? Okay, he's not here. Yeah, I want to say a special thank you for the work that you have done, and Dr. Cynthia Ndlovu. I hope she is here as well. And then I would like to thank the sign language interpreters. They've done very well. I remember that if they don't interpret well, people remember that they didn't. Deputy Minister, you will remember at one funeral, I will not quote it as to which one it was, that the interpreter was interpreting something that I call in my in my other language, which I call it Gobleti Gook. But they've done very well. It is emphasizing the whole point of the importance of language. Myself as a scientist, I really think that it needs to go towards teaching science in indigenous languages. Mainly because I was jealous, DM. I met some Chinese colleagues when I was in Cambridge who came speaking Mandarin and learned the language of the trade and all that stuff. So it is possible to learn science in your own language. So atoms and everything else should be able to be pronounced in my Siswati. And thank you, VC, for mentioning that earlier on we were forced to learn ngolwimi lwakamthiyane nasebhode because Siswati was in the process of developing. I'm one of those products. And I will translate to all of you ulwimi lwakamthiyane nasebhode isiZulu. So that is something that is close to me because we learned Ngolobane and uhlelo lwesiZulu. I want to also thank Mr. Ubisi. Is he still here? Okay, I will not make him stand up. He is very instrumental every time we organize things. He is there to talk to our stakeholders and make sure that the functions are done well and takes care of protocol and so many other things. So I'm saying, Mr. Ubisi, thank you. I'm also strategic that you will be available for the rest of the functions that I'm organizing for the rest of the year. But you have never disappointed, so thank you very much. It's the director-stakeholder liaison. Also, I would like to thank the technical and IT support. The function so far has gone without a glitch. So I would like to say kudos to you. I know the quality of work that we have learned to expect, but we have kept, to it. And IT has been an excellent support even to this function. The next comment is a bit dangerous because I have not eaten yet. But because of the performance that I've learned to expect from our restaurant upstairs and everybody else, I think you will testify that they were worth the thanks I'm giving them before I eat anything. So the caterers, the people who prepared the meal that we are going to enjoy, thank you very much. You have never disappointed me before, so I have the confidence to say I will not be disappointed today. The Deputy Minister, for honoring us with delivery of the lecture and the team that supported him to get here. I recognize there's a lot of people who have to make sure that the Deputy Minister gets here. But more so the lecture. It has made me aware and educated me a whole lot, even though I'm a DVC here, about the importance of language. So, because you know many language, I'm saying gracias. Mucho gracias. I think you know that. But because I come from Nkomazi, I'm saying muito obrigado. Thank you very much for coming. Ministers are busy, but I'm glad and the passion at which the lecture was delivered to all of us. All of us now have a hobby of making sure that we learn languages. I was embarrassed just shortly in Lusaka. One day I was attending a WHO regional meeting, and there were so many people, interpreters who were interpreting Portuguese into English and English, others to other languages, and we didn't have a real common language with which we should speak. We had to speak to somebody who will speak to somebody else to speak to us so that we can hear what the person is saying. And so the issue of language is a passionate one for me. But also, VC, the whole issue of itakazelo. We can't even translate that into any other language except in that particular language. And I believe the language transmits culture as well. So there's something that is missing every time when we have to translate a language. I would like to also thank Ms. Nom Santuli. We cannot thank you enough for making it possible for the DM to be here. I want us to clap hands for her. She's the leader that made this possible. And then the program director, Professor Mashudu, Rolivua Ngamanda. You have done very well in leading this program. We really appreciate it with all the dignity that it deserves. We appreciate you. The lecturer and staff and students who made the time to come and listen to this lecturer, our security outside who are not here now, some of them are standing at the periphery to make sure that nothing goes wrong. We really appreciate it. This is your function, and we thank you for taking ownership. So that I tell you I'm an African. Asante sana.
Prof. Mbewe, the chairperson of the board, thank you so much. You know, today, VC, it's my lucky day. When you are in Mpumalanga and get a speaker who comes and speak your language, it just got right into my heart. And when Prof. Mbewe added, I said, wow, this is my lucky day. Anyway, my name is Mashudu. It means I'm the lucky one in my language. So on that note, I will request this lady who doesn't take no for an answer. Anytime she comes to your office, if you don't respond to her email, she will barge into your office and give you instructions. You know whom I'm talking about? Yes. Dr. Sibongile Masuku. I'll request you to come and do that which you know best. Thank you.
Colleagues, students, community representatives, and everybody congregated here, we'd like to thank you, but most of all, I also want to thank our guest here. So, Minister, may I request that you come to my side. Please don't say I bullied you to come here. Right? You won't. Okay. For a photo opportunity, please come over. This is to make sure that you won't forget us. When it's hot, you'll open the umbrella. When it's cold, when it's raining, you'll open the umbrella. When you're having a picnic, you'll open the umbrella.
I'm told it's very bad, Mashudu. It's Mashudu Mabui, Mashudu Mavi, to open an umbrella. But it's a gift. It's very appreciated because in politics there are many, many storms. So.
I'll divulge the secret. It's also cups with our university name on it. Please make sure that when you are served tea in your office, it's with those cups. We also have to thank our panelists for all the research that they did and the wonderful presentations from yesterday and also their responses to this public lecture. I'll first call upon Dr. Makanya to come and receive this little gift. Dr. Mazanai you do not go away with nothing. Dr. Makubela. Dr. Nzioki. And the beautiful lady, Nom Santuli, where are you? Umavula kuvaliwe. Yes, this brings us to the end of our ceremony today, and I would like to request a few things that we need to observe. We are going to go and take a photograph outside, but I would like that the DM and the Vice Chancellor and management, as well as the respondents, to be given passage to go outside for the photographs. And then the rest of us will join them. And also, of course, our representatives here. That's, of course, the CEO of Pansal, our traditional representative. And then we will all then go and join them. After the photographs have been taken, I'd also request the same, that we give passage to the people that I've already mentioned, the DM, the delegation, the Vice Chancellor, first to go into the restaurant, and then the rest of us will follow. Thank you very much.